When voters go to the polls tomorrow in Minnesota, they will see two constitutional amendments on the ballot, a voter ID amendment and a marriage amendment. Both have drawn a lot of attention during the campaign, and tonight we take a closer look at both measures. We begin with the voter ID amendment, and our Lacey Monteleone joins us live from in the studio now with more. Lacey?
Yeah, Dennis, the voter ID amendment has been a key talking point in Minnesota this election year. While the amendment received much higher support earlier in the year, many polls show the vote on the voter ID amendment much closer now, and both sides remain very passionate about the issue. For supporters of the voter ID amendment, voter fraud is a big concern.
Ballots are disappearing. People who have voted or have not voted, they have voted. Dead people have voted.
But opponents say voter fraud in Minnesota is nearly non-existent.
Minnesota doesn't have fraud, okay? We have some irregularities on occasion. On occasion, people who, on probation who haven't had their civil rights restored vote. They're not supposed to. And that's what we county attorneys see.
Freeman says those occasions are rare and that the language contained in the amendment could leave many voters disenfranchised.
For example, we know that up until right now, and unless the amendment passes, this won't change, but we use private college identification for much of our same day or election day registration. Well, a private college ID obviously is not government issued.
Our current system does turn people away without a chance to vote. If you're new to a neighborhood, your ID doesn't have your current address in the precinct, and you want to do election day registration, you're going to need to show a utility bill that's recent that shows that you live in the precinct. And if you live with a roommate, the utility bill's not in your name, you're not going to be able to use that to register and vote on election day.
Still, opponents of the voter ID amendment say that there is a better way to go about things. For those who do not have an ID, election officials could simply take their picture with their cell phone and run it through a database to make sure that person is eligible to vote. That way no one is disenfranchised and the state saves money. But proponents of the voter ID amendment say that just won't work.
We can't expect election judges to be able to use the same tools in scrutiny that identification issuing professionals employ to verify that you really are who you say you are.
Opponents also say they worry that voters' ability to vote early through mail-in ballots may also be compromised.
Having to present a photo ID, government issued, at the time of voting means you got to go to a place to vote. And a lot of people would have to drive a long way.
If they have ID, they put the ID number in there. If they don't, they can vote on a provisional ballot and then bring their ID in at a later time.
But for both sides, there is no greater issue than the right to vote. Now, costs for implementing the voter ID amendment vary from $40 to $60 million depending on who you ask. Secretary of State Mark Ritchie says those immediate costs are dwarfed, however, by ongoing costs, which could be $1 to $3 million a year for townships and $10 to $20 million a year for cities and counties. Proponents of the amendment, however, do not project such high costs, Dennis.
If you've enjoyed this segment of Lakeland News, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution to Lakeland Public Television.